Constructive Criticism is sponsored by Oasis Games. MTGOasis.com is the place to get cards for your next Magic event. Try them out with code CCMTG for 15% off of your first order, and use the code WouldThatBeGood for 4% off of every order. Want to support the show directly? Head on over to patreon.com/CCMTG to check out some awesome benefits and future goals for the show. Thanks for listening, and here's this week's episode of Constructed Criticism. Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host Spencer, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Gold Pro John Stern.
Hey everyone.
And LPM Hall of Famer Seth Manfield.
Hey, what did you just say, Spencer? You said something.
LPM, MPO.
Oh, did I say it wrong?
You said it. Yeah.
That's great.
Okay.
That's staying in the podcast. That's a thing that happened.
I mean, all the acronyms are backwards in French, so like you're trying to reach a European audience. I think it's good.
If I put the middle letter at the end, what happens?
I don't know.
Well, we just want to give a special shout out this week to our newest patron and returning patron, Andrew. Welcome back as a patron, Andrew. It means so much to us that you come back and support the show, and it's really cool to see those people that they have things come up in their lives and they come back as patrons. It means a lot. This week on the show, instead of doing our typical Patreon question at the beginning, we actually posted in our Constructed Critics group an opportunity to talk to us about Best of One and ask us questions about Best of One. So we're going to have those questions at the beginning of the main topic. Before we get there, I'd like to talk about Always Improving for just a minute. I do have an Always Improving that I want to discuss on the podcast this week. So this week, I lost a lot of matches of Magic. One of the things that I lost a lot of matches, like maybe 30. It was a lot, and maybe that's not a lot to you guys. Maybe you guys are like, oh, no,
in an afternoon. I don't know what you're.
Yeah,
you guys.
I've lost thousands of matches this week. So
that's like I play so much Magic, but like for me, that's quite a bit. My win percentage is really suffering, and I'm gonna after this podcast, I'm not gonna play Magic for the rest of the week, and I kind of want to talk about that and talk about having a healthy mindset and like a healthy relationship with the game, because. One of the things I noticed myself doing today is I started keeping bad hands. Like I've been, and I literally said to myself, like the gambler's fallacy. I was like, oh, I've gotten so unlucky this week. This one's destined to get there. And then immediately drew a land, and I was like, I'm so stupid. Why did I think that? Obviously, that's not true. And I am falling for this mistake that, I preach on the podcast not to make. And it was really funny to have that happen. What were you gonna say, Seth?
I was just saying, like, you're preaching to so like, at least in my case, like when you say have a healthy relationship with the game, I'm like, well, you're coming from a very different like wealth of life in that you actually have like a very different job. Like,
sure.
Whenever I hear that, I'm like, yeah, like I just play Magic. That's all I do, man. Like,
I would say that getting paid $70,000 to play Magic is a healthy relationship with the game, Seth.
What about 75,000?
There you go. Plus whatever you're making from your stream and sponsorship, right? So like, I think that your relationship is healthy. I think that I also think when you get really upset with a game, do you like take a step back?
What if I told you that I was staying up until 3 a.m. this morning because I have to submit a deck list for a tournament?
It depends on what do you have to do tomorrow?
Sleep.
I mean, it could be fine. I don't know. But for me, it's like when I catch myself doing things that I preach not to do on the podcast, it's kind of time for me to take stock of where my mental state is at. I kind of before this all happened. I hit Mythic again, and I got to like the top 700 in Mythic, and kind of was just sitting there like, okay, like I'm gonna get top 1,000 this month, and then I kind of got lackadaisical, and then it kind of all snowballed from there. And I think that kind of recognizing when you're in a bad mindset is really important, and also recognizing what caused that. So, for example, I really, really hate this draft format. And I was like, okay, well, I'm already...
Is it Allegiance?
Yeah, I hate Erratic Allegiance a lot.
You must not have drafted the blue-white no creature deck yet.
So everybody tells me to try that deck for what it's worth. So maybe I'll give it another shot, but I was already Mythic and I was already in the top 1,000, so I was like, okay, well, I want to play Magic, so let me do this thing that I hate. And then I was really mad because I was losing. And I was losing with very, very good decks, and I was like sending it to my friends, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong or how to fix this. And then I was in my rage, I like queued up into ladder and was like, whatever, I'm gonna go make myself feel good and win some games of Magic. But instead, because I'm upset and things aren't going my way, like I played poorly and I kept bad hands, and it is a clear sign to me that I just need to take a couple days off. And I would just encourage listeners, when you're on that ladder grind, when you're grinding Magic, to sometimes take stock of where you're at and not unless you're Seth Manfield apparently and you want to stay up till 3 a.m. But for me, I think it's important. So, all right, should we get into our main topic? Should we do that?
Well, we were going to ask the questions, but I think like we're doing best of one, so like should we just read the questions and not answer them? Is that more on theme for best of one?
What does that mean?
Well, because you get to answer things with your sideboard. Anyway.
I get it. Yeah, so
we'll start with those.
Yeah, so let's kind of set this up really quick. So this week on the show, we are going to talk about best of one, and the reason that we're covering best of one is because, well, for one, there's a huge, if not, I mean, it is the biggest Magic tournament ever coming up next week. Seth, you are qualified as a member of the MPL. Prize
That's
money.
debatable.
Prize money wise.
No, I mean the Team Pro Tour was, yeah, technically it is, but it's
I will say that, like, I mean, I don't view it that way. I mean, Seth, you're part of it, so maybe it feels different for you, but like, it's an invitational that the people were not able to qualify for. So I just don't feel that sense that it's huge.
Hey, as Seth said, we could have qualified, John. He told us last week.
Like, there's no path to qualification. But it's like even like when they used to have the invitationals, those were like cool events that I'd watch, but I just did not feel they were this super important tournament. I don't like even the World Championships, to me, like I guess for me, like the biggest tournaments are the ones that like I can go to. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I can make the argument that all of the tournaments, like the Pro Tours, you also have to qualify for. I think for me, I would say that like a World Championship type event,
sure,
where there's clear paths to qualification, like where you can actually qualify, like you have this route that you have to do well. Obviously, you have to do really well, but like that to me is like kind of like I've always said my biggest tournament win was my World Championship win. But
yeah, like do you feel that winning this invitational would be as important to you as like winning a Pro Tour or winning Worlds or something like that? I mean, there's more money in it, right? What's first place? $250?
Yeah, it's super hard. I've never played a digital, event like this, so it's hard for me to know. I can tell you that I've prepared my ass off. Like I've been playing nonstop because it's a lot on the line. There's a lot of great players, but so it certainly means something to me. I don't like to compare apples and oranges, but
sure.
I mean, the money does certainly give it legitimacy, like, but at the same time, like, when they did whatever the Silver Showcase prize money was, it was significant, right? Like, do you think, like, personally, I didn't feel that whoever won the Silver Showcase was going to treat that as like an important event. Like
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
This is like, to me, somewhere between. It's obviously higher, like it's obviously meaningful. The 32 best players or the 32 best ranked players from last year are there, plus all their invites. So like,
I think part of it, and we'll get into this a little bit more, is that for the Silver Showcase, like I'm not sure I would have, like there would have been skill with the beta draft and all that, but for me, I've fallen like in love with this best of one format personally. Like I've gotten really into it. Despite going in circles and all of that I always do. But like, anyways, part of me is liking the format a lot. So if I feel like I like the format and it's something new to me, then it makes me care that much more about it.
Sure.
How have you, Spencer, you've been playing Best of One. How have you found it? Are you enjoying it like Seth is?
Well, that's going to be our first patron question. So,
okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. So before we get there, I just want to clarify Best of One. So if you were, I don't know how you would know this, but basically at the Invitational, they're going to submit 2 Best of One decks, and then they will play their. Do you play the first deck randomly, Seth?
Yeah.
So you play the first deck randomly, then you play the second deck, and then if you get a game 3, you get to pick which deck you play.
Correct.
So that's the format for this invitational. And so there's a contingent of the Magic community that's been streaming this a lot because of this event, and then also it's relevant because you can rank up this way to qualify for something like the Mythic Championship, for the online Mythic Championships, the arena ones. With that being said, our first question is from Alex H, and it says, "Is this an enjoyable format for anybody? Stripping sideboards appears to flatten the environment and restrict viable deck choices." So, Seth, we kind of already got your answer.
Can we actually answer this in 2 parts?
Yeah.
Can we answer it in terms of, did you think you would enjoy it, and then how are you enjoying it?
Sure.
Because I think it's interesting to see if that's changed, at least for you.
It's true. And I also think that part of the question is faulty, and I'll get into that, I guess, because because there are sideboards in Best of One, contrary to popular belief.
That's in my notes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah. So like, there's a lot of masterminds acquisitioning going on. I'll say that, but beyond that, like, sideboards can be relevant, and it's pretty interesting that you can legitimately play masterminds acquisition is such an insane, insanely cool card, and it really doesn't work for Best of 3 very well, but it works so well for Best of 1. So it's one of my favorite cards in the format.
Yeah, I'll start with the kind of how John kind of asked the question, and that's what did I expect going into testing for this. So I did a lot of this for the podcast. I played lots of different decks. I tried Esper mono red and mono white aggro stuff, just because like they're the things that people say was good, along with mono blue and stuff like that. And then I tried like fun decks. I tried different stuff. I tried mono red Phoenix. I tried these derpy Gates deck. I tried Scape Shift, which by the way was my highest win percentage by a lot. And going into it, I thought this will be really fun. It'll be really different. I'll get games in really, really fast. And the thing is I love Best of One draft. So I was like, Best of One constructed will probably just be just as fun. It'll let me get games in fast. And if I'm just kind of having fun, it'll be whatever. And maybe that would be true if I wasn't playing ladder. But I did not find Best of One very enjoyable. And we'll kind of get into, I'll probably get into why during the course of the conversation. But I found it a bit polarizing, and as somebody who really loves like mid-range and ramp decks, that's not as fun for me. Seth, what about you?
Well, yeah, I already said it. I've really enjoyed it personally. Just kind of the idea of the different decks and making me think like in different ways where I don't know. It's just something new where I have to be able to like think about the top decks. Like, I didn't necessarily think that I would enjoy playing mono red aggro or whatever, but like I do. Like, and I enjoy, like, there's these decks that it's just like, well, yeah, it's just like mono red or whatever, but like I don't know, the games have been super fun. As I mentioned earlier, some of the Esper Mastermind variants have like allowed me to, that's been the deck where I've found like I've had most amount of interaction and gameplay. I understand that there is the flip side of it. Well, certain decks are inherently worse because of, well, first of all, you're playing on arena, right? So there is that hand smoothing algorithm, which everyone references, and that's kind of related to the ratio of lands to spells in your hand, which basically does help the aggressive decks because it doesn't take into account the colors of lands. It just takes into account the ratio of lands. But anyways, so there's a couple things. I've liked it. I didn't think I would like it, but I just can't really get enough of it. Like, I'm sure after this, after I am lucky, right? I'm in the event. After the event, I'll inevitably go back to playing some Best of 3 after this is over. But yeah, like if you've watched my stream, like the other day, I had this like crazy game where I like had to like clear my library like 3 times or something and like copy it with Masterminds acquisition. And then like Or like there's these weird cards, like if these Esper control decks are revolving around Teferi, you can just like play Sorcerous Spyglass in your main deck or whatever, and just like there's all of this metagaming that's going on. Like, how many Moment of Cravings do I want for my red deck, or how many, whatever.
That's an interesting point. You brought up two things that I thought were really interesting, because I agree with one of them a lot. I tried different things that I wouldn't have tried in a best of 3 format. So, for example, we talked a little bit last week about how I was trying like a red-black Phoenix deck, and I actually have a lot of fun playing that deck, and I probably wouldn't have played it if I wasn't practicing for this episode of this podcast. And it was a nice change of pace, to Seth's credit. Like, sometimes parts of Magic get stale, and it was really fun to, and I learned a lot, as we talked about last week. So to Seth's point, like, the differences are there, and parts of it are fun. The second thing that you mentioned is something that I brought up last week that's actually in my notes, Seth, which is, do you find that it's important to like find those tech cards and find out like what the technology can be in this best of 1 metagame?
For sure. Like, once I know how other people are building their decks, then I can find these cards that are able to kind of break open the format in a different way. We've seen lists with unmoored egos in the main deck, because like targeting specifically control, or decks with all life gain like Dobins Acuities and Revitalizes because of mono red. Like, I don't remember seeing a Dobins Acuity best of 3 deck. Like, that's as far as I'm concerned, that is best of 1 exclusive. So you have these decks that wouldn't be viable at all in the other format. And then you also have these cards that get worse. Like, if I look at a card like Lava Coil, a card we've talked about on the show, like these removal spells that are really high quality premium removal spells that deal with creatures, but then I realize how many dead cards can I have in my matchup? Like if I'm playing against Esper Control, this is a game 1 situation. So how many Lava Coils can I play if I know that they're not going to do anything against Esper? Or if I'm playing Esper, how many removal spells can I play if I'm going to play the Esper mirror match, right? And I just have a bunch of Kaya's Wraths and Cry of the Carnariums and Moment of Cravings and Cast Downs and whatever, and then my opponent has like something that actually does something. So having a creatureless deck in the format completely skews. Like, you'll see these mono blue decks, but no longer can mono blue necessarily play Essence Captures in their deck because they don't do anything against Esper. So you've got a lot of these weird dynamics.
I was playing versus that deck, and it was playing Quelch. Was it Quelch? Is that the name of the card?
Quench.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In that spot, which was really good.
Yeah,
I will say that I've been watching a lot of people playing best of 1 on stream. When you watch people in an Esper mirror and like they each have 6 cards in hand, and I see one side and it's like Kaya's Wrath, Mortify, Moment of Craving, like all these uncastable cards, and the other guy's got uncastable cards, and the game goes on forever. It's just kind of fun to watch. But
yeah, I'm hoping it makes for a good viewing experience. I don't know that it will, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I will say though, like I haven't played. I haven't played best 1 really. I mean, I played like 1 or 2 games of it just to try it out, but I think my impression when they announced it was pretty favorable. Like, I like, there's something about like playing when I'm testing, for example, I like to play a lot of best of 1s first to learn the deck, to learn the matchup before I even like consider sideboard. And I find those games are very fun. They're usually fast, and I'm sort of like, yes, you can run into matchup problems where like your deck's winning 20 or 30% of the time, but like, I'm usually playing to find out that number, not so much just to win every round. So I think that, it could be possible to have best of 1 tournaments even in stores. And I don't really see, like, one of the problems with running a tournament in a store is like the round is 50 minutes. You have people who finish their round in 15 minutes and do nothing for 30 minutes. But if it's best of 1, you sit down, you play, you could have like a 15-minute timer or a 10-minute whatever, and just play like twice as many opponents, 3 times as many opponents. I think it could be really interesting. So I don't I don't know if it has to be just for online.
And one of my favorite things about a best of one type format is you can actually bring multiple decks, which is something that you're not really, doing very often in best of three, if ever, in these competitive events. So I'm actually, like, for this invitational, I have the option of bringing 2 separate decks, which I will be doing. So yeah, like, I'm going to be bringing two different decks to the table, and I get to learn each one of them separately. And they're like, and then there's this kind of, once you know your deck, there's this dynamic of figuring out like which one I want to choose in a potential game 3 deciding. I could also see a potential for it to be even more than 2 different decks, for us to be bringing 3 or 4 or however many. Like, it's possible.
Do you think anyone will show up in the invitational with duplicate decks?
I mean, yes, I for sure think that that's the case. I've already heard some people announcing decks on Twitter, and
somebody said that they were bringing aggro slanted Sultai and control slanted Sultai. I saw somebody post that.
Well, I think it'd be kind of really risky to bring like 2 exact copies of the same deck. Like, if you run into one bad matchup, you're gonna have to beat it twice.
I saw Cedric on Twitter said he was he brought 18 he has 18 planes in both of his decks. So.
Nice.
So the next question that we have is, what are some sweet decks that were held back by sideboard answers that are playable in best of one? So I'm going to start with kind of a difference to this question that Henry's asking, because, as I said, my highest win percentage is actually with Scapeshift in this format, and a large part of that has to do with the fact that there's no Nexus of Fate decks.
Well, yeah, the banning obviously changes the metagame. In best of 3, like, Nexus of Fate is a tier 1 deck. I mean, it might not be the best deck, but it's one of the good decks. What is, like, how many tier 1 decks are there, do you think, in best of 1? Like, what are you playing against online a lot, Seth?
Well, I think that the tier 1 decks, I just call them red, white, and Esper. Mono red, mono white, and Esper. But then there's going to be a lot more decks beyond that. I would expect there's Esper Acuity is the other version of Esper that has Dobins Acuities and revitalizes and masterminds acquisitions. You've got mono blue, of course, Golgari variants, black-green variants. Your various Super Friends, big mana decks.
So do you think, like Spencer, the Scapeshift deck, you think that's being held out by sideboard answers, or just the fact that Nexus of Fate exists?
Yeah, I think that like, I think that, for what it's worth, Guild Summit decks at large are significantly worse against a metagame where they can sideboard for you and Nexus of Fate than in this format. However, depending on the how the Esper control decks are built, that can also be a bad matchup depending.
So, yeah, I wrote Gates off pretty early on, and I never even really tried the Scapeshift deck. I've never even played against Scapeshift, and I played over 1,000 matchups. So it's interesting that you would bring up a completely new deck, but that I understand Scapeshift probably goes into Gates, strategy, but I haven't it's like, to me, it's something new. I'd be surprised to see much Gates at the Invitational, but
I think the deck's like straight up a mean. You win with Psychic Corrosion, Scapeshift, and Guild Summit, but it's the reason that I did so well with the deck is because of the extreme metagame we're talking about. I get to play the Archangel that gains me a ton of life in the same deck as my Psychic Corrosions against Esper, right? So I'm covered on multiple angles of this extreme metagame, and I'm not impacted by some of the things like Nexus of Fate. But I think to Seth's point, I think that the idea that there's not sideboards has been kind of knocked out of this format, for what it's worth. Like, for a really good example is, I just jumped into best of 1 with my Gruul deck, and I got to flashback my opponent's Mastermind's Acquisition with my what is the name of the two-man the
Dire Fleet Daredevil.
yeah, with the Daredevil, which was really powerful.
Yeah, and there's a couple different things that can randomly come up. So make sure, like I have 30 sideboard cards that I'm registering. Like I'm not coming, without a sideboard. There's these weird situations where you can like Thief of Sanity your opponent and then get their masterminds and then play it and cast something. And there's definitely some really cool things. Like I have Masterminds Acquisition and got like 7 or 8 of my sideboard cards in a total game. Like I'll get 2 here and I'll get 2 again, and like because I'm copying it with the Mirari Conjecture, which is a card that I never really got to experience much with, but it turns out is like kind of sick.
I did play that card in a tournament.
You did?
In the Drake's deck, Blue Red Drakes. I had one, I think.
Okay.
It was like French technology. Someone wanted GP with it, I think.
Yeah. So anyways, that's like just an example of one of those really powerful cards that I just like forgot about. And then yeah, like I'm pretty happy that they banned the Nexus decks from Best of One. I'm not really sure what it would have done to the metagame if they had been legal. But
well, generally the aggro decks are bad matchups for Nexus of Fate, right?
Right, exactly. Like I feel like there's gonna be a lot of white, like 1 mana 2/1s at this tournament, and there's gonna be a lot of stuff of that nature. The games are gonna play out quickly, but there are I don't know. I've also been going into scouting, okay, which we've talked about previously, but like part of preparing for a big tournament like this is to know your competitors, because if I'm able to successfully guess what the other 63 players are playing, that gives me a huge advantage to actually choosing a deck for this tournament. So yeah, like some days I'll go on the ladder and I'll play against all team or Reclamation, or I'll go on the ladder and I'll play against all red or all whatever. And then, so guessing the metagame is a pretty big advantage if you're able to do that on a specific day or time. Like I picked up the Esper Acuity deck one day and completely tuned it, and then the next day, like I probably played against it more than any other deck. So
an interesting point to what you just said, Seth, back to the question from Henry, is I actually do think the Team of Reclamation deck is significantly better in Best of One, especially once you put in the deal 2 to non-pirates. Like that deck actually is really good, if not one of the best decks in the format.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that card be played in the Team of Reclamation deck, and I think that in general, monocolor decks, like just at their core, are better. Like we're not seeing Azorius aggro at all, really, in Best of One, even though
that was only debatably even better than Mono White in Best of 3. It's pretty close.
Yeah, like Azorius aggro is like the default white aggro deck of Best of 3, but it's just non-existent in Best of One because the primary reason why you would play blue is it's like kind of not that significant, especially in the first game. Like sometimes you'll have a couple blue cards maybe in your main deck, but like most of them are for games 2 and 3. And there's really not a reason to make that sacrifice. Very similar to red. Sometimes we would see this like mono red splash green or something for like Cinder Vines in the sideboard, but like now it's just straight up red. And I've also learned, like I've just been calling decks like red or green or black, because like it's just automatically in my mind that they're just monocolored at this point. And so like I learned that there's a mono green deck, like it's a real thing and it's actually pretty good.
Yeah, the Galta deck.
Yeah, like the Galta, Nullhide Ferox, like obviously, like I even tried mono black. Like there's the monocolor decks are really good. So if you're interested in good clean mana bases where you don't have to worry too much about your lands, then I think that Best of One has a lot of advantages.
Are you the reason that I played against Mono Black 4 times the other day? Is that you, Seth?
Dude, there's a couple different ways to play Mono Black. You can play the chromatic black version, which is like the lantern, you know, go crazy with all of your colors type thing, or you can play just good old fashioned Mono Black beatdown with. So yeah, and like I'll get paired against an invitational competitor, and I'll like write down what they're playing or try to, and they're always playing something like insane. Like I'm playing against Shoutout in the queues, and he'll be playing like red black tokens, and I'm like, what is going on? And he'll just like beat me on turn 4. I'll just like click click click, and then I'm just done with the match, and I'm like, what just happened? Like it'll be like that type of thing where I'm learning, and so to see all of these great players kind of like we've been going deep into the tank to try to find ways to crack, because like going into this, right, it was basically assumed that this was a solved format. Like the hand algorithm has solved everything. Like mono red was just insane or whatever. Like that's what we thought. Like 2 weeks ago, I think if you had asked most of the MPL competitors what they thought of the format of the Invitational, they would have just said something like, oh, like I'm not that excited to play, or like it's just best of one. It's not like real magic. It's not the same. There's not really that much skill involved. And yeah, as to John's point earlier, like that's kind of what I was thinking, honestly, going into it before I started playing with it. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot more to it. And it's not easy, but like I've made it up to rank 4, like the 4th ranked Mythic player playing only best of 1. So like it's
that's really hard, man, because you don't get as many points for playing best of 1. So I when I was in best of 1 today, I went undefeated and only gained 2 percentage points after losing all those best of 3 matches, because best of 1 is worth so much less per win. So like I don't know what your win percentage is, but it sounds really good.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Like those mono red mirrors will get you. I'm telling you.
Can we actually talk about this for just a second? Because this has actually been a question that we get from listeners quite a bit, and it's actually a question that John has in his notes, which is kind of like grinding to Mythic. And it's funny because Frank Carson did an article on this and talked about until you get out of like silver or gold or something, you play best of 1, then you switch to best of 3, then you switch back to best of 1. But if you actually talk to the players who qualified for the Invitational through grinding Mythic, they all switch to best of 3 because it's easier to keep your win percentage higher in that format, and the wins are worth more when you do win. So go ahead.
Yeah, that's you make a valid point. But at the same time, I've seen players rank up all the way to number 1 playing only best of 1. I know that there's MPLers that have done it. I was obviously close to getting to 1, couldn't quite get all the way there, but yeah, they're like best of 3, because you're playing 3 games and you get to sideboard in any one match, you have a little bit more room to maneuver. So it's a little bit more easy to control your own fate in that type of way. But yeah, there is skill involved in
Sure.
in best of, you know, and you can go on these crazy runs. It is possible.
Yeah.
So
I would think though that that's kind of the reason why it's hard to climb in best of 1 compared to best of 3 is just that going on a streak, like the amount of times you have to win in a row in best of 1 to go on the same point streak as best of 3. Like you can go on a 10 match winning streak. It happens at GPs every tournament. It's difficult. It's like winning 2 leagues on Magic Online.
But that's a 20 game win streak.
Yeah, and if you have to do that in best of 1, it's 20 games, and that's, you know, everything has to go right. No bad mana draws. You know, no detrimental mulligans situations.
John, when you were grinding to Mythic last in, was it February? What were you playing?
Well, I just played. So I basically, after I didn't play any arena before the Mythic Championship, and it finished on like the 25th or something. So that's like, okay, I'll load arena, and I just played my PT deck basically in best of 3, I didn't make any changes, so I played mono white. I think it was quite good. It took me 65 matches to get to Mythic, from like whatever the lowest is, bronze 4.
Sure.
But I mean, I think part of that is like the fact that it's so late in the month that like a lot of the good players were already Mythic. So
sure.
I don't know, maybe it's different if you do it early in the month. But I was interested for this question. Like the reason I wrote in my notes is like, so I'm a competitive player, right? Like I haven't played any best of one. Let's say I wanted to get to best of one and go for top 1,000. Like, is there different? Do you think there's a different metagame at different levels? Do you think like somebody, like a listener who's like, you know, getting into arena and they want to rank up to Mythic, and is there something they should start playing in bronze and silver and then like move to a more complicated deck, or like what do you think for the different levels?
So I think through bronze and silver, you get 2 wins. You get 2 notches per win, no matter if you're playing best of 1 or best of 3, and then you only lose 1 with a loss. So you should just play best of 1. Like there's not a reason not to.
Yeah, I get that question a decent amount on my stream. It's like, what is the fastest way to get to Mythic? Like that's what people want to know. Like how can I just, you know, go from bronze to Mythic quickly? And you know, there's a couple ways to do it, and I've also seen different metagames at different tiers on the ladder at different times. What's interesting is at the start of a season, I think the competition at like a diamond level type tier is going to be very high because there's not that many mythics yet. So like right at the beginning, it's the most difficult to actually hit mythic right away. But like at this point, a lot of the like I already hit mythic like a couple weeks ago, or like whatever it was, and a lot of players did the same. So like you could the aggro decks are going to be the fastest. That's the shortest answer. Mono white or mono red are just good decks, and
the fastest in terms of like time, but like just because the games are faster.
Well, there are also 2 of the top 3 decks in the format.
Yeah.
Now you could get more room to actually outplay people choosing something else, like an Esper control deck.
I think that if and I can put this in the show notes. Frank Carson did like a number of matches at X win percentage article. I think, but I agree with what Seth's saying. So like, if you want to do it on pure speed, playing an aggro deck through in best of 1 through bronze and silver makes the most sense, and then switching to best of 3 for whatever deck you want to play in that through gold and platinum. So I actually agree with what Seth just said too. So the beginning of the month I started at plat 4, I got to diamond really fast, and the competition actually like catapult, like it was a huge jump. It went from like playing an FNM to like playing a PTQ almost instantly, which was fun and cool for what it's worth. That's the level of competition that I like to play against. And like the number of like I played against a lot of like gold pros and stuff like that at that level. I was like, oh man, like this is sweet. Like I'm playing so many games against like really good competition here at Diamond, and it's only the 4th day of the month.
Do you just know their gold? Like, do you just people use their real names? Is that how you know?
So a lot of them are streamers, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And then we have listeners that, I mean, I text Seth twice in the last. You have Henry who asked the question. He played against Seth 2 or 3 times this month, grinding the Mythic as well. So it's cool to kind of see that. But I think that once you're in gold, platinum, and diamond, I don't really see a reason to play best of 1, to be honest.
Yeah. Speaking to that point, one of the coolest things about this preparation for the Mythic Invitational is if you made it to Mythic, if you made the grind and you got there, and I don't know what the number is, but I think there's at least over 1,000 Mythics. I guarantee you played against and you've been playing best of 1. You've been playing a ton, and I mean a ton, against the players that are going to be in the Invitational. Like I played against like some opponents. Like I probably played against BBD over 10 times in the past week. Like because I just keep getting paired against Mythic Invitationals.
Hey,
like
he's at 0% right now. Brad Nelson just posted it, so he's like must be real good.
What do you mean 0%?
I'm sure it's a bug.
I have no idea what that means, but okay.
So instead of being at like 98%,
that's not true at all. That's not true. That's
yeah, I mean, you can't just say you played BBD 10 times without telling us how many times you won.
Well, yeah.
All of them, right? You won them all?
Yeah, if you want to know the answer, I personally ranked up with Esper and Red. And those are two completely different strategies. But those were the two decks that I made it to Mythic with. And I learned like the ins and outs of them. It was fun. Like I enjoyed it, and it was not easy. It was hard. Like,
so I do want to say that one of the things that I find cool about Best of One, even though like I don't love the format, just because of the kind of the polarization of it, it is still cool to see something like a Dobins acuity deck doing really well. So that deck is actually really sweet. And one of the things that it gets to do, right, is like it gets to take advantage of this engine card, because the format it slows down the format itself. So Dobin's Acuity, for those who don't know, is one a blue and a colorless for an enchantment where you draw a card and gain 2 life, and then if you play an instant at sorcery speed, it returns to your hand. And the really funny thing is, like,
actually, let me hold you for a second,
sure,
Spencer. So if you play the Dobin's Acuity, it's not at sorcery speed. It's if you play it in your main phase, because there's been multiple times.
Sure.
There's been multiple times where this exact interaction has happened, where I'll play the Acuity, draw my card, and then my opponent instantly points a Mortify at it, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll just play something and pick it up or whatever. And it's like that's happened a surprising number of times, because I think that. Anyways, go on with your explanation.
No, that's actually a really good point. I actually didn't know that. So that's a cool interaction I didn't know about. So, but it is actually cool that like this deck that is entirely built upon slowing down the game and then like winning with Mastermind's acquisition. So I had this deck milled out completely with Scapeshift, and then they cast Mastermind's acquisition, cleared the mind, shuffled the and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so honestly, dead.
The amount of games that are settled by milling in this format, I love milling, right? And the amount of games that are settled by just having 0 cards left in your library in Best of One is high. It's higher than I've ever experienced ever. Like it's up there. There's a lot of decks like the Mastermind's acquisition. Like I get so many questions. What's your win con? Like that's the most common question I get whenever I'm playing a deck like that. What's the win con? And I'm like, well, I'm playing Mastermind's acquisition. Like that's the win condition. Or like I built a deck with just Unmoored Egos and Mirari's Conjectures, and I literally had these are all creatureless decks, and it's like, what's the win con, man? Like, how do you win the game? And I'm like, I just make my opponent miserable. Like I'm just like shuffling things I'm just clear the minding, and it's a lot of the time it's by my opponent either conceding or running out of cards in their library. Like, I mean,
you took their best shot and
yeah, it's like whenever you ask what's the win con, there's always a win con you may not be thinking about, and that is the opponent not having any more cards left to draw.
I actually have a question, because I actually don't know the answer to this, because I haven't played the Dobin's Acuity deck. Do they play Teferi?
Not part of the Mastermind's acquisition package normally includes a Teferi, but oftentimes they will play the Immortal Sun or Sorcerer's Spyglass. Sure. So like the Immortal Sun is a really strong card against Esper and against some of the other decks, but you can't really play it in the same deck as your Planeswalkers.
So one of the things that I found really good in this format, Seth, is cards that require very specific answers. So like Rekindling Phoenix, I've seen mono red playing that card, like just trying to make their threats harder to deal with, because not everybody's going to just have an answer to that. Is that something that you think is good? Is that something that you believe is correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's this weird dynamic of you can't answer everything. So like I've been finding myself trying to line my answers up in really weird ways. Like my Esper decks that I've been playing, I keep wanting like these Cry of the Carnariums, and I'm not just talking like one. I'm talking about like multiple copies in my main deck, and I'm like I keep like wanting these cards that I would like be thinking about. I can just sideboard it in best of 3, but I'm like no, if I like I need to put it in my main deck. That's my only choice. It's either in the main deck or it's not there. But if I'm sticking a bunch of Cries, then I'm inevitably cutting like some like cast downs or some like whatever removal spells that if my opponent just plays like giant green fatties or like rekindling phoenixes or whatever, and I'm just like, all right, I'll like infest your spellbreaker and your phoenix. It's like no, like that's not gonna end well. So it really is this like balance of like how far are you willing to go to like target like because I honestly think that white aggro might be the most played deck at the Invitational. Obviously, I don't know the numbers, but like it's been really popular. So
I was getting crushed by that deck with everything today. And granted, my opponents were getting really, really lucky, but like I was like, can nothing beat this deck's nut draw? Like,
well, Cry of the Carnarium can.
No, I lost casting Cry of the No, because they play. You don't understand. Stubhorn Sentry don't care about your Cry of the Carnarium. So when they go stub, that into freaking what's the Loxodon guy? I'm like, what is in my hand? Anyway,
dude, you were supposed to be playing mono red, and like I've had these like turn 3 like insane wins with like Runaway Steamkins.
Yeah,
and, like,
Runaway Steamkin makes a huge comeback in this format.
Yeah, like I'll like Steamkin and then I'll like light up the stage and I'll like frenzy and I'll just like it's insane.
I 19'd my opponent with no permanence in play at the beginning of the turn with a red Phoenix deck today. That felt sweet. Like that was cool in best of 1.
Yeah. I've seen some Phoenix variants like red black and red blue, not like mono red splash blue, not like your straight Is It versions, but like your like tormenting voice, like chain, like your like chain whirler, Arclight decks. Like every deck, it seems like wants to play chain whirler. Like we're seeing Teamer chain whirler in this format because like with like treasure maps and like Critises and like
so I tried this deck, by the way. So Huey Jensen streamed this deck. He went like 11-0 and he on stream, so it's like 4 treasure maps, 4 Crisis, 4 chain whirlers. So it's like Gruul without the green cards. And then it's like got Banefires in the main deck. So somebody texted me, they're like, dude, this deck's insane. You got to try it. And my friend played it. He went like 9-1 himself, and then I picked up the deck, and I was just getting smashed because I mean I'm not Huey Jensen, but 2, it's so crazy how fast stuff is traveling in Magic right now. People already knew what I was doing 1 day later.
Yep.
Which seems crazy for this not being posted anywhere but Twitter.
Or Twitch, yeah.
Is it because it's getting posted on Twitter? Like I haven't been following. Like, do things get out that way? Like I know they're the arena deck list or whatever, but
so I was there's yes, I think that people are looking at the streams. I mean, there's a lot of viewers on Twitch. I think it's mostly Twitch, like the stream deckers and like the list. Like I was playing this new version of Esper Acuity one day, which I designed, and it like has the Mirari's conjecture in the main and stuff like that.
Oh.
And now like everyone is familiar with that list. Like as soon as I was streaming it, then like 3 or 4 other people started streaming the list because they thought it was cool. And like whenever there's a cool deck like that, like I think Kiwi called it like Kazurin or like there's like some sick name for it. But anyways, like there's these decks that are not just straightforward and they're winning a lot, and so people are going to notice them immediately. Like especially if you're streaming, anyone that is streaming them.
Well, what if you're just like say I'm playing a deck on like my account that nobody knows and I'm not streaming. Can I play like a deck and play it for a couple days? Will it still get out, or is it?
I don't think so. It's usually something that somebody's streaming. And actually, the point that Seth just made, the stream decker, the thing that lets you copy the deck list from the stream, that actually might have a huge reason to why they're getting out so fast? Because people just load them directly in. So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, I don't have any. I think we covered most of your stuff as well, John. But when we talked about live tournaments, but kind of
the only thing, like the only other thing I wanted to ask is like, so you said there's 3 tier 1 decks basically. Do you think that the format is more diverse or healthier than best of 3, or could it be if like it was fleshed out fully, or is it like more restrictive because like the mid-range decks kind of take a big hit and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I don't think Wizards specifically designed the cards within, like they've started designing the cards more, I think, with best of 1 in mind. Like you'll see these cards that have like do multiple things, so they're not just like dead cards. Like you'll see like, you know, kill a creature or draw a card, or like an effect like that. So I think that there's going to be more diversity moving forward. Like right now, I would say there's probably a bit less diversity, but not by a large amount compared to best of 3. Like you have these
decks and you get some other decks and it's kind of the same.
Yeah, like you have most of the same decks. Like in best of 1, you have Masterminds. In best of 3, you have the Nexus of Fate decks, and then almost all of the other decks. Like the green decks, I think are better in best of 3 than best of 1, but there's still like there's still going to be people at the tournament that are playing Golgari or Celestia or whatever, and they're still like.
Well, you were saying that mono white's good, and I played mono white in best of 3, and like a Sultai matchup game that's game 1 only sounds like my worst nightmare.
Oh yeah, there's no Sultai. Like I played against Sultai 1 time in best of 1.
Well, whether it's Sultai or black green, like it's the Wild Growth Walker package and fine finality. Like I can't beat that game 1. Basically.
It's not there, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is going to be present, I think, but it's not going to be. It's not like it's more people have cut the blue, right?
Sure.
Because they've cut the Crasises and they've just gone for Carnage Tyrants and Memorials and just straight up black green, 6 months ago, because the mana is easier and but like you said, like there is this metagame going on where if everyone expects white, like Golgari should still be, pretty good against that.
All right, well, that is going to do it for this week's episode. Don't forget to follow Seth at Seth Manfield, John at John Stern MPL. You can follow me at Spencer Manfield. Wow. I'm like tired, guys. I could change my name. You can follow me at Spencer13H. And you can follow the podcast at CCMTG. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. Thanks to our sponsor and thanks to our patrons. And good luck at the I think, Seth, you probably won't be on the show next week. Maybe you will. I don't know. TBD.
Yeah.
TBD.
We'll talk about that.
We'll see. We'll see. But either way, good luck at the event, man. I hope you crush it. Yeah.
Appreciate
and also, shout out to Luke, one of our listeners, who is also qualified through the top 8. Good luck to both of you. I hope you guys just destroy it, man.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.